The night enveloped the small town in a blanket of tranquility, the cool breeze rustling through the leaves as Lucas strolled along the dimly lit streets. The stars twinkled above like distant lanterns, casting a serene glow over the quiet neighborhood. He relished these late-night walks, moments of solitude where he could escape the pressures of daily life and lose himself in thought. Tonight was no different, and he took a deep breath, inhaling the crisp air, feeling the weight of the world lighten with each step. As he rounded a corner, the peaceful ambiance shifted. At the end of the street stood an ice cream truck, its presence jarring against the stillness of the night. The truck's lights flickered ominously, casting eerie shadows that danced across the pavement. Lucas paused, a sense of unease creeping into his heart. It was unusual for an ice cream truck to be parked here at this hour, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He shrugged off the sensation, convincing himself it was just a figment of his imagination, and continued walking. However, as he moved forward, the sense of being watched intensified. A prickling sensation crawled up his spine, compelling him to glance back. To his shock, the ice cream truck had begun to roll slowly down the street, its engine purring softly, almost menacingly, as it kept pace with him. Lucas quickened his stride, his heart racing. Was it just a coincidence? He tried to rationalize the situation, but the truck's steady pursuit felt deliberate, as if it were stalking him through the shadows. The chilling melody of an ice cream jingle floated through the air, its cheerful notes contrasting sharply with the dread pooling in Lucas's stomach. "No way," he muttered under his breath, shaking his head as if trying to dispel the haunting tune. The truck had no business being here, yet it followed him, its headlights flickering like the warning lights of an approaching storm. He took a deep breath, willing himself to remain calm. "It's just a truck, he repeated, although the mantra offered little comfort. With every step, the feeling of dread deepened, gnawing at him like a persistent shadow. He glanced back again, and this time, the truck had stopped completely, its engine silent. The headlights extinguished, plunging the street into a deep darkness that swallowed the light. The sudden absence of sound was unsettling, and Lucas felt a chill wrap around him, as if the night had drawn closer, tightening its grip. "Come on, it's just a truck," he whispered to himself. But the words felt hollow. He could sense it. The air was thick with something unnameable, a tension that made his skin prickle. Lucas had always heard stories about strange happenings in town, tales whispered among friends that hinted at the unspeakable. But those were just stories, right? He shook his head, trying to dispel the creeping sense of paranoia. With each passing moment, he felt as though the truck was a predator, and he, its prey. He turned to look one last time, and to his horror, the truck's silhouette loomed larger in the darkness, as if it were daring him to come closer. Panic surged through him, and he broke into a run, his feet pounding against the pavement as he sought refuge in the familiar streets. The cool breeze turned icy, biting at his skin as he sprinted, the haunting melody of the ice cream jingle trailing behind him like a ghostly echo. just keep moving," he whispered, his breath coming in sharp gasps. The night felt alive around him, every sound magnified, the rustling leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, and the relentless hum of the truck's engine resuming its pursuit. Lucas's heart raced, a drumbeat of fear urging him to escape the clutches of the unknown. He could not shake the feeling that something terrible was unfolding, pulling him into a dark narrative he could not comprehend. As he ran, he felt the weight of the night pressing down on him, a foreboding silence wrapping around him like a shroud. Lucas could only hope that he would find safety before the shadows caught up with him. As the ice cream truck's engine revved ominously behind him, Lucas felt a surge of panic. His heart raced as he quickened his pace, the rhythmic sound of his sneakers hitting the pavement mingling with the chilling growl of the vehicle. Each thud echoed like a distant warning, urging him to escape. He glanced back, but the truck was still a shadowy figure, its headlights flickering like the dying embers of a fire. "It's just a coincidence," he muttered to himself, trying to infuse his voice with a sense of rationality. "Ice cream trucks are everywhere, especially at night. It's a hot summer." But even as he spoke, A haunting melody wafted through the air, a familiar tune that twisted his stomach in knots. It was the jingle of an ice cream truck, but something about it felt wrong. The notes were stretched and distorted, echoing through the night like a ghostly whisper. He pushed his hands into his pockets, feeling the cool metal of his keys dig into his palm, a small comfort against the gnawing fear that enveloped him. The melody grew louder, more insistent, tugging at his consciousness. Desperate to drown it out, he focused on the cool breeze rustling the leaves overhead, the distant chirp of crickets harmonizing with the soft thump of his footsteps. But the truck was relentless, its presence looming closer with every passing second. Suddenly, the truck's headlights flickered off, plunging Lucas into darkness. The sudden absence of light felt like a suffocating blanket, wrapping around him and squeezing the breath from his lungs. He stumbled slightly, his instincts urging him to move faster, to escape the enveloping shadows that threatened to consume him. "What the hell is happening?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the pounding of his heart. He glanced over his shoulder, half expecting to see the truck looming right behind him. Instead, there was only darkness, oppressive and thick, making his skin crawl. He turned back and saw the vague outline of the truck, now just a silhouette against the faint glow of streetlights in the distance. It stood still, an eerie statue in the night, and for a moment, Lucas felt an overpowering urge to run toward it, to confront whatever lay within. But common sense prevailed. He was not ready to face whatever horror the truck might harbor. "Just keep walking," he reassured himself, his breath quickening. Yet as he resumed his pace, the unsettling melody returned, echoing in the darkness. A siren's call that tugged at his curiosity and fear in equal measure. What kind of ice cream truck played such a tune? A sudden chill ran through him as he recalled the stories whispered among the townsfolk. Tales of children who vanished without a trace, their laughter swallowed by the night. The truck, he realized, was no ordinary vehicle. It was a specter of something sinister that lurked just beyond the edges of his understanding. What if it's true, he thought, his mind racing with the implications. The thought sent a shiver down his spine. What if it really is connected to those kids? He shook his head, trying to dispel the dark thoughts, but they clung to him like shadows, whispering secrets he didn't want to hear. He picked up his pace again, each footfall a desperate attempt to escape the growing dread. His breath came in short gasps, the air thick with apprehension. He needed to find safety, any place where he could escape the haunting presence of the truck and its chilling melody. As he turned a corner, Lucas spotted a narrow alleyway. It seemed like a lifeline, a potential refuge from the terror pursuing him. Without thinking, he darted into the alley, the coolness of the shadows welcoming him like an old friend. The sound of the truck's engine faded slightly, but he could still hear the faint echoes of the jingle, a reminder that he was not free yet. Just a little further, he urged himself, pushing deeper into the shadows, his heart racing with anticipation and fear. But even as he sought solace, a part of him knew that the nightmare was far from over. Lucas's heart raced as he sprinted into the narrow alley, the worn cobblestones slick beneath his feet. The oppressive darkness enveloped him, and the sound of the ice cream truck's engine throbbed relentlessly behind him, a sinister heartbeat in the night. Panic surged through him, urging him to run faster, as if the very act of fleeing could erase the chill creeping into his bones. "Just breathe," he whispered to himself. But the words felt hollow, swallowed by the shadows. He turned sharply, hoping the alley would lead him to safety, but the truck's engine continued to follow, a persistent reminder that escape was an illusion. As he darted deeper into the alley, his foot caught on a loose stone, sending him sprawling against the rough brick wall. He gasped, his breath hitching in his throat. Scrambling back to his feet, he caught sight of a faded flyer stuck to the wall beside him. The paper was yellowed with age, crumpled at the edges, and as he peeled it free, a chill washed over him. "Missing, Sarah Thompson. Last seen near an ice cream truck." The words blurred before his eyes as he read the details. The age, the date, the haunting familiarity of the case echoing in his mind. It had been years since the girl vanished, her disappearance shrouded in mystery. And here it was, a stark reminder that the town had buried its secrets deep. Lucas's breath caught in his throat as the connection struck him like a lightning bolt. Was this truck connected? He thought, his mind racing. He could almost hear the whispers of the townsfolk, the murmurs that had floated around like smoke. Stories of children lured away by a seemingly innocent ice cream truck. The melody of the ice cream jingle reached him again. But this time, it morphed into a distorted version of a children's song, warped and twisted, sending a fresh wave of terror through him. The innocent notes that once evoked memories of summer days now felt like a sinister incantation, summoning dark forces from the depths of his imagination. He pressed his back against the wall, his heart pounding like a drum, listening intently as the truck slowed down. The sound of the engine idling sent a shiver down his spine. "What does it want?" he whispered to himself, his mind racing with possibilities, each one darker than the last. "Lucas, you need to think," he urged himself, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down. Suddenly, silence enveloped the alley, and for a moment he dared to hope he had lost it. But that hope was short-lived as the eerie silence was replaced by the soft, melancholy tune of the ice cream truck's music, now echoing ominously in the stillness. Come out, wherever you are." The tune seemed to mock him, wrapping around him like a noose. Lucas squeezed his eyes shut for a brief second, trying to steady his racing thoughts. With a deep breath, he took one cautious step forward, peeking around the edge of the wall. The truck sat just outside the entrance to the alley, its headlights off, casting long shadows that twisted and danced in the moonlight. He could see the outline of the vehicle, stark and menacing against the backdrop of the night. "Maybe if I just stay still," he thought, hoping to remain undetected. But the instinct to flee clawed at him. He couldn't shake the feeling that the truck was watching him, waiting, as if it could sense his fear. "Who's there?" a voice called out from the shadows, startling him. It was low and gravelly, sending a jolt through Lucas. He froze, heart racing, his mind racing with questions. "Is someone there?" The voice came again, and Lucas could feel the weight of its presence, a palpable darkness creeping closer. He ducked down, pressing himself against the cool surface of the brick wall, praying he wouldn't be seen. The music shifted again, its tone darkening, and Lucas's breath quickened. He could barely think as he strained to listen. The driver was here, lurking just outside the alley, and Lucas felt an overwhelming urge to scream, but the sound caught in his throat. Then, silence fell again, thick and suffocating. Lucas closed his eyes, desperately trying to focus on anything but the fear clawing at his insides. The air felt heavy, the darkness sharp, and in that moment, he realized that he had stumbled upon something far more sinister than he could have ever imagined. The ice cream truck was no longer just a vehicle. It was a harbinger of nightmares, tied to the shadows of his town's past, a past he wasn't sure he was ready to confront. "Get a grip, Lucas," he murmured to himself. But deep inside, he knew that the true horror was only just beginning to unfold. Lucas crouched behind the dumpster, its cold metal pressing against his back. The alley was cloaked in shadow, and the faint glow of the ice cream truck's headlights illuminated the entrance like a spotlight. The haunting melody that had followed him throughout his frantic escape now played softly, a chilling lullaby that filled the air with dread. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, echoing in his ears like a war drum. From his hiding place, Lucas strained to see the driver. The silhouette was a dark shape against the light, and as the figure leaned closer to the window, Lucas's breath caught in his throat. The driver had a grotesque smile, unsettlingly wide and stretched across a face that was mostly obscured by the shadows. It was as if the darkness was shielding something hideous. The driver scanned the alley, and Lucas felt a cold sweat trickle down his spine, the instinct to flee battling with the paralyzing fear that held him captive. Come out, wherever you are," the driver crooned in a sing-song voice, the words dripping with malice. It sent shivers through Lucas, who dared not make a sound in response. He watched, heart racing, as the driver leaned further out of the window, the smile never faltering. The truck's music faded to a whisper, allowing the night to settle into an eerie silence. Lucas's mind raced, piecing together fragments of memories and whispered stories from the town. He remembered the old tales, the missing children, the ice cream truck that had vanished from the streets, leaving only fear in its wake. Each story felt more real now, as if the shadows of the past were rising to confront him. He caught sight of a faded emblem on the side of the truck, a symbol that sent a jolt of recognition through him. It was the same design that had been on the flyers for the missing child, a girl named Lily. Lucas's throat tightened as he recalled how her disappearance had haunted the town, her face a ghost in the memories of those who had known her. The driver leaned back, still searching, and Lucas risked a glance at the alley's entrance. It felt like every second stretched into eternity. He was trapped in a nightmare, the lines between reality and his darkest fears blurring. He had to escape, but the thought of moving seemed impossible with that sinister figure hovering outside. As if sensing his internal struggle, the driver's voice sliced through the silence. "Don't be afraid, little boy. I have something sweet for you." There was a sickening sweetness in those words that made Lucas shudder. He felt an urge to bolt, to run as far and as fast as he could, but the fear of being caught kept him rooted in place. Suddenly, the driver exited the truck, the sound of the door creaking open, breaking the stillness of the night. Lucas held his breath, praying the man wouldn't look his way. The figure stepped into the faint light, and Lucas squinted, desperate to get a clearer view. The driver was taller than he had expected, his face still obscured, but the smile now more pronounced, almost manic. Lucas felt a surge of sickening dread wash over him as he realized he could see the outline of something in the driver's hand, a small cylindrical object that glinted in the moonlight. "Come on out, Lucas," the driver called, his voice now low and menacing. "I won't bite, I just want to show you my treats." A shiver ran down Lucas's spine. How did he know his name? Panic surged through him, and he fought the urge to scream. The driver took a step closer to the dumpster, his eyes narrowing as they searched the shadows. Lucas felt a sense of urgency swell within him. He couldn't stay hidden here much longer. He had to figure out a way to escape. He glanced around the alley, looking for any possible exit. But the walls loomed high and unyielding. The haunting melody resumed, a distorted echo that filled the air with an ominous promise. "Don't you want some ice cream?" the driver cooed, his tone sickly sweet. "It's very special, just for you." Something twisted and dark flickered in the depths of the driver's eyes, and Lucas could feel the weight of dread pressing down upon him like a heavy blanket. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, he pushed himself off the cold metal and prepared to make a break for it. He had to move, had to escape this nightmare before it consumed him whole. But just as he was about to dart out from behind the dumpster, the driver turned sharply, as if sensing the shift in the air. "Where do you think you're going?" he called out, his voice turning sharp, cutting through the darkness like a knife. Lucas froze, his heart racing as he realized he had only moments to act. The driver was no longer just a shadow on the street. He was a predator, and Lucas was the prey. The choice became clear. He could remain hidden and hope for the best, or confront the terror head-on. As the ice cream truck's music swelled, Lucas felt the weight of his decision pressing down on him. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever awaited him in the darkness. Lucas's heart raced as the reality of his situation began to sink in. The driver of the ice cream truck was not just a stranger. He was a figure shrouded in the town's dark past, a ghostly echo of the tragedies that had unfolded years ago. Memories of hushed whispers in the town square and the haunted looks on the faces of parents who had lost their children flooded his mind. He could almost hear the chilling tales of the missing children, each story linked by the sinister presence of the ice cream truck that had once been their last sighting. Summoning every ounce of courage, Lucas knew he could no longer hide behind the dumpster. He felt a surge of determination coursing through him. It was time to confront the horror that had stalked him through the night. As the haunting melody faded into an eerie silence, he stepped cautiously from his concealed spot, his breath shallow and quick. The alley felt colder now, the shadows lengthening as he approached the truck, which sat ominously still, its engine a silent threat. "Hey!" Lucas shouted, surprising even himself with the boldness of his voice. The air was thick with tension as he stepped closer, his heart pounding in his chest like a war drum. The driver turned slowly, his movements deliberate, as if he had been expecting Lucas all along. The dim light from the street lamp flickered, illuminating the figure's twisted face. A grotesque smile stretched across his lips, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp, too menacing. It was a visage that belonged in nightmares, not in the waking world. Lucas felt a wave of nausea wash over him, but he stood his ground. "Who are you?" Lucas demanded, his voice steadier than he felt. "What do you want?" The driver's smile widened, revealing a glint of madness in his eyes. "I'm just here to bring joy to the children," he replied, his voice a low, gravelly whisper that slithered into Lucas's ears. "Just like before." Before? The word echoed in Lucas's mind, intertwining with the stories he had heard as a child. He could feel the weight of history pressing down on him, the significance of this moment coiling tightly around his throat. "Those children, what did you do to them?" Lucas pressed, anger mingling with fear. He stepped closer, fueled by a desperate need to uncover the truth. "They were lost, weren't they?" The driver's eyes flickered with something akin to delight, a glimmer of recognition as if Lucas had finally grasped the depth of the horror. "Lost? Oh no, they were never lost. They chose to come with me. They wanted the ice cream." His laughter was chilling, echoing off the alley walls like a taunt. Lucas recoiled, the realization crashing down on him like ice water. The stories were true. The children hadn't just vanished into thin air. They had been lured away, seduced by the promise of sweets and laughter. The driver was a monster disguised in the guise of a purveyor of joy. "You're a monster!" Lucas shouted, anger igniting his fear. "You're nothing but a coward hiding behind a truck." The driver's smile faltered, and for a brief moment, Lucas saw something human flicker behind the madness. "Coward? No, my boy. I'm a guardian of their happiness. They wanted to escape, and I gave them the chance." Lucas felt bile rise in his throat as the driver's words sunk in. "You're lying. You took them away from their families. They were children." "Children are so easily tempted," the driver replied, his tone eerily calm. "It's the adults who never understand, but they will eventually." Without warning, the driver lunged toward Lucas and instinct kicked in. He bolted down the alley, his legs moving faster than he ever thought possible. The air rushed past him, the sound of the truck's engine roaring back to life behind him, an ominous growl that chased him through the darkness. As he ran, Lucas vowed to expose the truth. He wouldn't let the memory of those lost children fade into oblivion. He would bring the horror to light. But as he dashed through the winding streets, a chilling thought gnawed at him. What if the driver was right? What if the town was complicit in this nightmare, too afraid to confront the darkness lurking in their own shadows? With the echoes of the past chasing him, Lucas knew he was in a race against time, not just for his own safety, but for the souls of the children who had been lost to the siren call of the ice cream truck. Lucas sprinted through the dimly lit streets, the adrenaline coursing through his veins like wildfire. His heart pounded against his ribcage, a frantic rhythm matching the urgency of his thoughts. He fumbled for his phone, his fingers trembling as he dialed the police. The device felt slick in his grasp, as if it were a slippery bar of soap, but he managed to steady it against his ear. 911. "What's your emergency?" The operator's voice cut through the night, calm yet urgent. "Please, you have to help me. There's an ice cream truck." Lucas gasped, trying to catch his breath. "It's been following me. The driver. He's connected to the missing children." Panic laced his voice, making it quiver. "Sir, I need you to stay calm. Can you tell me your location?" The operator's voice was steady, grounding him for a moment. "I'm at Oak and Pine, just a block away from the alley." "Stay where you are. We have units en route. Are you in any danger right now?" "I don't know. The truck..." He hesitated, the image of the grotesque driver flashing in his mind. "It was right behind me, but I think I lost it. It was playing that song, the one from when I was a kid. It's so wrong, it's just wrong. Stay on the line, sir. Help is coming." The operator's voice became muffled as Lucas glanced over his shoulder, half expecting to see the truck creeping up behind him. He felt a flicker of hope igniting within him, as the wail of sirens pierced the night air, echoing off the buildings. Relief surged through him, but it was short-lived. He reached the alley, breathless and trembling, only to find it empty. The ice cream truck had vanished into thin air, leaving no trace behind, as if it had never existed. No, 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 Lucas muttered under his breath, his heart sinking. It can't be gone. He stepped cautiously into the alley, scanning every shadow for a sign of the driver. The silence was deafening, the kind of silence that clawed at the edges of sanity. "Lucas!" a voice called from behind him, breaking the stillness. He turned to see two police officers approaching, their flashlights slicing through the darkness. "Did you see it?" he asked, desperation creeping into his voice. "The ice cream truck? It was just here." The officers exchanged worried glances. "What ice cream truck?" "We didn't see anything on our way here," one of them said, his brow furrowing. "It was right here, I swear, the driver. He's connected to the missing kids." Lucas's voice cracked, frustration bubbling to the surface. "Okay, let's take a step back," the other officer suggested, his tone soothing. "Why don't you tell us what happened?" As Lucas recounted the encounter, the officers listened intently, their expressions grim. When he mentioned the driver's twisted smile and the emblem on the side of the truck, the first officer's expression shifted. "We need to check our records," he said, pulling out his radio. Moments later, the officer returned, his demeanor somber. "Lucas, I need to tell you something. The driver of that truck, he was declared dead years ago." Lucas felt the world around him tilt. "What do you mean? That can't be right. I saw him. He was right there." He gestured wildly towards the alley entrance. "I understand this is difficult, but the person you described, he's been missing for over a decade. He was involved in some pretty dark stuff in this town," the officer explained, his voice steady but sympathetic. "No, I'm not crazy," Lucas insisted, his voice rising in pitch. "I'm not imagining this. Something is wrong here." "Let's take a deep breath, Lucas," the second officer said, stepping closer, his tone calm. "You may have experienced something traumatic. We recommend you talk to someone about it." Lucas felt the weight of their words crushing him. He had stumbled upon a ghost, a specter of the town's past, and now he was left grappling with the horrifying realization that he had been lured into a trap woven from the unresolved fates of lost children. The truth he sought had slipped away, just like the truck, and he was left with a haunting emptiness. "I just wanted to know the truth," he whispered, feeling the chill of despair seep into his bones. The officers exchanged glances once more, their expressions a mixture of pity and concern, but Lucas felt utterly alone, the echoes of a haunting melody lingering in the night air, a reminder that some secrets were never meant to be uncovered. The sun was setting over the quiet town of Eldridge, casting a warm, golden hue on the streets as the Silva family pulled up to their new home. The old house stood at the end of a narrow lane, its peeling paint and creaky porch exuding an air of antiquity that both intrigued and unsettled them. Marcos, the father, glanced at his wife Luisa and their daughter Clara, who were both staring at the house with a mix of excitement and trepidation. "Well, here we are," Marcos said, forcing a smile as he parked the car. "Home, sweet home." Luisa chuckled nervously. "It has character, doesn't it? Just needs a little love." Clara, a curious 10-year-old with bright eyes and an adventurous spirit, jumped out of the car, her ponytail bobbing as she dashed toward the front door. "I want to see the inside," she exclaimed, her voice echoing against the stillness. As they began to unpack, the silence enveloped them. The only sounds were the rustling of moving boxes and the occasional creak of the house settling. Clara, with her boundless energy, flitted from room to room, her laughter filling the air. However, there was an unsettling presence that lingered, particularly from the abandoned house next door. Its darkened windows seemed to watch them as if harboring secrets. "Mom, why is that house empty?" Clara asked, peering out through the window, her brow furrowed in curiosity. Luisa, organizing kitchenware, shrugged. "I'm not sure, sweetheart. Maybe it's just been vacant for a long time." Marcos, who was arranging furniture in the living room, glanced at the house next door. "It looks like it hasn't been touched in years." He felt a chill skitter down his spine, but quickly brushed it off. "Let's focus on making our new home cozy." Later that night, the family settled down to watch television. The flickering light from the screen cast dancing shadows across the room. Clara, snuggled on the couch, suddenly pointed towards the window. "Look, there are lights in that house." Marcos and Luisa exchanged glances, their curiosity piqued. "What do you mean, Clara?" Luisa asked, leaning closer to the window. "Over there," Clara insisted, her finger pointing excitedly. "See, they're flickering." Marcos stood up, walking over to the window. He squinted into the darkness, and sure enough, there were faint glimmers of light coming from the abandoned house. "That's strange," he murmured, feeling an unease creep over him. "It looks like someone is inside." "Maybe it's just a trick of the light," Luisa suggested, though her voice lacked conviction. "Or maybe it's a ghost," Clara giggled, her imagination running wild. "Let's not jump to conclusions," Marcos said, trying to maintain a rational perspective. "It's probably just some reflection from our TV." The laughter that filled the room faded as night deepened, and an unsettling stillness enveloped the Silva home. As Clara settled into bed, her eyes drifted toward the window. She could see the faint lights flickering again, casting eerie shadows across her walls. "Dad?" Clara called softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcos, who was reading in his own room, heard her and walked in. "Yes, sweetheart." "Can you see the lights?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Marcos looked out the window again, but the lights had vanished. "I don't see anything now. You must have been imagining it," he reassured her, though he felt an uncomfortable knot in his stomach. After tucking Clara in, he returned to his own room. As he prepared for bed, he couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. He glanced outside once more, and that's when he saw it. A shadow moving within the abandoned house. His heart raced, and he stepped back, holding his breath. What was that? He wondered aloud, his mind racing with possibilities. Was it merely a figment of his imagination, or was there truly something, or someone, lurking in the darkness? The stillness of the night surrounded him, thickening the air with an unsettling tension. Little did the Silva family know that the flickering lights and shadows were merely the beginning of a chilling journey that would unravel the secrets of the forsaken dwelling next door. The sun rose slowly over the quiet town, casting long shadows as the Silva family gathered their courage for an expedition into the heart of mystery. Clara's excitement was palpable. Her wide eyes sparkled with determination as she bounced on her toes. "Come on, Mom. Come on, Dad. We have to check it out today." Luisa exchanged a wary glance with Marcos, who scratched the back of his neck, contemplating the strange occurrences from the previous night. "I don't know, Clara. That house looks... well, it doesn't look inviting at all. But we have to see it. What if there's treasure? Or ghosts?" Clara insisted, her imagination racing with possibilities. "Treasure or ghosts, huh?" Marcos chuckled, trying to lighten the air. "How about we just stick to looking for answers?" "Answers or treasure?" Clara replied, rolling her eyes in a playful manner. "They're basically the same thing." After a breakfast filled with nervous anticipation, the family set out towards the abandoned house. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and overgrown grass, and the distant chirping of birds seemed to fade as they approached the dilapidated structure. The house loomed before them, its windows like dark, empty sockets watching their every move. "See, it's just an old house," Clara proclaimed, her voice echoing slightly. Marcos took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the house's presence. "Let's just make sure we stay together, all right?" They stepped forward, the crunch of twigs and leaves underfoot breaking the eerie silence. As they reached the front porch, they were met with a door that appeared to have withstood the test of time. Its surface was gnarled with age, and thick vines curled around the knob like skeletal fingers. "Locked," Marcos said, tugging at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. "Guess we'll have to find another way in." "Wait, look at this!" Clara pointed to a small window nearby, barely visible through the curtain of vines that choked the frame. She hurried over, her small hands brushing aside the greenery. "It's open." "Clara, be careful," Luisa warned, her heart racing. "I'll be fine, just a little peek," Clara replied, already climbing onto the porch railing. "Don't you dare jump through that," Marcos exclaimed, panic lacing his voice. But before he could reach her, she had already managed to squeeze her head through the opening, her eyes wide with wonder. "It's dark inside. I can see some old furniture. It looks like a living room." "Okay, that's enough exploring for today. Time to head back," Louisa insisted, her tone firm. As they turned to leave, a sudden gust of wind swept through the area, rustling the leaves and causing Clara to shiver. "Did you feel that?" she asked, wide-eyed. "I did," Marcos replied, glancing back at the house, which seemed to sigh in response. Once home, they found an envelope resting on their porch, its presence stark against the white wood. Clara picked it up, her heart racing with curiosity. "What's this?" Marcos took the envelope and opened it carefully, revealing a note scrawled in jagged handwriting. "Leave now before it's too late." "What does that mean?" Clara asked, her brow furrowing. "I don't know, sweetheart," Louisa said, her voice trembling slightly. "But it doesn't sound like a friendly message." That night, as the family settled in, the atmosphere was thick with unease. Louisa lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing with questions. Suddenly, a soft whisper drifted through the window, barely audible but clear enough to send chills down her spine. "Louisa!" She bolted upright, her heart pounding. "Marcos!" she whispered, shaking her husband awake. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" he mumbled sleepily, squinting at her. "The whispers. Someone is calling my name." Marcos frowned, listening intently, but the only sound was the rustling of trees outside their window. "It's just the wind, babe. You're imagining things." But Louisa was not convinced. The whispers had felt so real, so urgent. She lay back down, staring into the darkness, questioning the true emptiness of the abandoned house and what it might be hiding. Marcos stood at the entrance of the town library, the heavy wooden door creaking ominously as he pushed it open. The air inside was thick with the smell of old books and dust, and the soft shuffle of pages turning created a serene atmosphere that contrasted sharply with the turmoil brewing in his mind. He walked down the narrow aisles, his heart racing as he approached the desk, where Mrs. Almeida, the town librarian, was meticulously cataloging a stack of new arrivals. Her silver hair was pulled back into a tight bun, and her glasses perched on the tip of her nose, giving her an air of quiet authority. "Ah, Marcos Silva, what brings you here today?" she asked, looking up with a warm smile. "Mrs. Almeida, I need your help," he replied, urgency lacing his voice. "It's about the abandoned house next to our property." Her expression shifted, a shadow crossing her features. "The old Ramirez house? You shouldn't meddle with that place, you know." "I know. But my daughter, Clara, she's been seeing things, and I just want to understand what's going on," he confessed, glancing around as if the walls themselves might be listening. Mrs. Almeida leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "There are stories, Marcos. Dark ones. The last owner, Senor Ramirez, was a recluse. He was rumored to have lost his family in a tragic accident. Some say he went mad after that, and eventually he vanished without a trace." "Vanished?" Marcos echoed, his mind racing with the implications. "What happened to him?" "I don't know all the details, but the townsfolk believed he had made some sort of pact to try and bring his family back," she said, shaking her head. "People reported strange happenings around that house. Lights flickering, odd noises. The police were called several times, but they found nothing. He was just gone." Marcos felt a chill run down his spine. "And no one ever found him?" "Not a trace," she replied, her eyes reflecting a mix of concern and curiosity. "But if your daughter is experiencing something, it could be tied to his anguish. Sometimes the past doesn't rest easy." "Thank you, Mrs. Almeida. I'll keep that in mind." With that, Marcos left the library, his mind swirling with questions and dread. As he drove home, he couldn't shake the feeling that the old man's sorrow was intertwined with their own lives, casting a shadow over their new beginning. That evening, Clara and her friend Miguel were restless, their curiosity about the old house bubbling over. "Let's go check it out," Clara suggested, her eyes sparkling with mischief. What if we get caught?" Miguel hesitated, glancing nervously at the overgrown path leading to the abandoned property. "Who's going to catch us? It's just an old house," Clara insisted, her adventurous spirit igniting a fire in Miguel's hesitation. Reluctantly, he agreed, and they slipped out into the night. the moon casting an ethereal glow on their path. As they approached the yard, an uneasy silence enveloped them. The air felt thick, almost electric. "Do you see that?" Clara whispered, pointing towards the porch, where an old rocking chair creaked back and forth, as if someone invisible was sitting in it. Miguel's eyes widened. "No way, that's creepy." "I told you it would be cool," Clara said, her excitement overshadowing her fear. They inched closer, the grass crunching beneath their feet. Suddenly, the chair stopped moving, and an unnatural chill swept through the air, causing them both to shiver. "We should go back," Miguel whispered, his voice barely audible. But Clara was already stepping onto the porch, drawn by an unseen force. "Just one more look," she said, peering through a grimy window. Miguel followed hesitantly, his heart pounding. Inside, the shadows danced, and they could almost make out the outlines of forgotten furniture. Meanwhile, back at the Silva house, Marcos sank into the couch, exhaustion washing over him. He stared out the window, the darkness outside palpable. Just then, he noticed something in the abandoned house, a faint glow flickering in the window. He squinted, trying to make sense of the sight. And then it happened. A silhouette emerged, an old man standing there, staring back at him with hollow eyes. Marcos froze, his breath hitching in his throat. The figure seemed to beckon him forward, a whisper of despair carried through the night air. "Clara!" he shouted, panic rising in his chest as he dashed towards the door. The chilling presence of the old man lingered in his mind, intertwining with the stories he had just heard. What was it that connected them all? What dark fate awaited his family in the shadow of that forsaken dwelling? Marcos stood at the edge of the overgrown yard, his heart pounding in his chest as he braced himself to approach the abandoned house. The silhouette of the old man lingered in his mind, a chilling reminder of the mystery that enveloped the crumbling structure. The vines that snaked up the cracked walls seemed to reach for him, as if warning him to stay away. Taking a deep breath, he pushed through the rusted gate, the metal creaking ominously. As he stepped closer to the front porch, an unnatural chill swept through the air, making him shiver. The door, slightly ajar, creaked ominously. He hesitated, glancing back at his own home, where Luisa and Clara waited, oblivious to the growing darkness that surrounded the forsaken house. With one last look, he steeled himself and stepped inside. The air was thick with dust, and the beams of sunlight that filtered through the grimy windows illuminated motes dancing in the stale atmosphere. Marcos could hear the faintest whispers echoing around him, but he couldn't make out any words. "Just the wind," he muttered to himself, trying to shake off the unease that clung to him like a shroud. As he ventured further inside, he noticed the furniture was eerily arranged, as if frozen in time. A faded armchair sat by the fireplace, an old dining table still set with tarnished silverware, and in the corner, a cracked mirror reflected the ghostly remnants of a life once lived. He swallowed hard as he walked past, feeling the weight of history press down upon him. Suddenly, a door creaked open behind him and he turned sharply. Nothing was there. His heart raced as he approached the hallway. "Hello?" he called out, his voice echoing, swallowed by the shadows. No answer came, just the unsettling feeling that he was not alone. Meanwhile, back at home, Luisa had noticed Clara sitting on the living room floor, her legs crossed, deep in conversation with an empty space. "Clara?" Luisa asked, her brow furrowing in confusion. "Who are you talking to?" Clara's bright eyes sparkled with excitement. "I'm talking to Señor Velo, Mom. He knows all about the house," she replied, her voice bubbling with enthusiasm. "He says it used to be very happy, but something bad happened." Luisa felt a shiver run down her spine. "Señor Velho? Who is that, sweetheart?" Clara grinned, unfazed by her mother's concern. "He's a nice old man. He says he wants to help us understand why the house is sad." Luisa knelt beside her daughter, unease settling in her chest. "What else does he say?" "He says there are secrets hidden in the house, secrets that need to be found." Clara's voice dropped to a whisper, her eyes wide with wonder. "He said we should be careful, though. The house is not empty." Across town, Marcos suddenly felt a cold draft sweep through the room, causing the hairs on the back of his neck to stand on end. He turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind him, trapping him inside. Panic surged within him, and he rushed to the door, but it wouldn't budge. "Let me out!" he shouted, his voice filled with desperation. As he beat against the door, the whispers grew louder, swirling around him like a tempest. "You shouldn't have come here," a voice hissed, sending chills coursing through his body. He stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a loose floorboard. With trembling hands, he reached for the nearest wall to steady himself. The old wallpaper peeled away, revealing faded photographs embedded within the plaster. He leaned in closer, and his breath caught in his throat. There, among the images of a family once vibrant with life, was a picture of the old man, his eyes piercing through the years as if he could see Marcos standing there. That night, as darkness enveloped the town, Marcos lay in bed, drenched in sweat. His dreams were plagued by the old man, who beckoned him into the depths of the house, whispering secrets that twisted his mind. "You must know," the man urged, his voice echoing through the dreamscape. "You are part of it now." Marcos awoke with a start, heart racing, the weight of dread heavy on his chest. He glanced at the clock, 2:13 a.m. The house creaked and groaned, as if echoing his own unsettled thoughts. He needed to confront the darkness that loomed not just outside but within himself, to protect his family from the specters that threatened to consume them all. The air was thick with tension as the Silva family stood before the creaking entrance of the abandoned house. Marcos squinted at the door, the rusty doorknob glinting ominously in the pale sunlight. "Are we really doing this?" he asked, his voice barely rising above a whisper as he shifted nervously from foot to foot. Luisa placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We need to know what's going on. This house, it's been haunting us since we moved in. We can't ignore it any longer." Clara, her eyes wide with excitement and trepidation, nodded eagerly. "We can't let fear win, Dad. We'll be careful, I promise." With a deep breath, Marcos reached for the doorknob, his heart pounding in his chest. The door resisted at first, but with a firm pull, it creaked open, revealing a dimly lit hallway that smelled of dust and decay. As they stepped inside, the floorboards groaned under their weight, sending a shiver down Clara's spine. "Stay close," Marcos instructed, his voice firm yet laced with anxiety. The family advanced cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the stillness. The walls were lined with peeling wallpaper, remnants of a life long forgotten. Faded photographs hung crookedly, their subjects obscured by shadows. But Clara's curiosity urged her to investigate further. "Look!" Clara exclaimed, pointing to a large, ornate frame hanging askew on the wall. As they gathered around, Luisa brushed away layers of dust to reveal an old family portrait. The faces were gaunt, yet familiar. The elderly man from the window stood proudly beside a woman and two children, their eyes sparkling with life. "Who are they?" Clara asked, her finger tracing the outline of the man's face. Marcos furrowed his brow, recalling the librarian's words about the man's tragic past. "This must be his family," he murmured. "But where did they go?" As they continued deeper into the house, they stumbled upon a small room cluttered with forgotten belongings. A rocking chair sat in the corner, still and silent. Yet Clara couldn't shake the feeling that it had moved on its own. "This place is so weird," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from upstairs, startling them. "What was that?" Luisa gasped, gripping Clara's hand tightly. Marcos exchanged worried glances with his wife before nodding resolutely. "We should check it out. Stay close." They climbed the creaky staircase, each step amplifying the sound of their hearts racing. At the top, they found a door ajar, the remnants of an old diary scattered around the floor. Clara bent down to pick up the faded pages, her fingers trembling as she read the words scrawled across them. "I couldn't save them. Don't let them take you too," she read aloud, her voice barely a whisper. The room fell silent, the weight of the words hanging heavy in the air. "Who is he talking about?" Luisa asked, her eyes wide with fear. Clara looked up, her face pale. I think he's talking about his family. They must have disappeared." Marcos stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the diary. "We need to find out what happened here," he said, determination flooding his voice. "These people deserve to be remembered." As they examined the diary more closely, they found a passage that detailed the man's desperation as he searched for his missing family. Clara's heart ached for the old man. What if he's still here looking for them? She pondered aloud. Before anyone could respond, the house seemed to shudder and a cold breeze swept through the room, extinguishing the dim light filtering through the window. "We should leave," Louisa urged, her voice shaky. "This place feels wrong." "Just a moment," Marcos insisted, flipping through the diary with urgency. "If we understand what happened, maybe we can help him find peace." Suddenly, Clara felt a chill run down her spine as she sensed a presence behind her. She turned quickly, but no one was there. "Did you feel that?" she asked, her voice quavering. "Let's go," Louisa urged again, her instincts screaming that they were intruding on something far beyond their understanding. Reluctantly, Marcos closed the diary and nodded. "All right, let's head back. We can come back later." As they retraced their steps, an unsettling feeling gripped them, as if the house itself was watching their every move, urging them to stay. But they had already made up their minds. As they reached the front door, the atmosphere shifted, and an oppressive silence fell over the house. Clara looked back, sensing that they were not alone. "I feel like something is watching us," she whispered, her eyes darting to the shadows. Marcos reached for the doorknob, but before he could turn it, the front door slammed shut with a deafening bang, echoing through the eerie silence. The family froze, their hearts racing as they realized they were no longer in control. As the Silva family turned to leave the abandoned house, the air thickened with an oppressive weight. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the dimly lit hallway as the front door slammed shut with a force that rattled the very foundation of the old structure. Marcos, heart racing, rushed to the door and pulled on the handle, but it wouldn't budge. "Louisa, Clara, it's locked!" he shouted, panic creeping into his voice. Louisa, her face pale and eyes wide, looked around as the whispers intensified, swirling around them like a chilling wind. "We have to find another way out," she urged, her voice trembling. "Wait," Clara said, her gaze distant, as if she were listening to something just beyond their comprehension. "I can hear him." "Who?" Marcos asked, turning to his daughter. "Senor Velho," Clara replied softly, a strange calmness enveloping her despite the chaos around them. "He's telling me that he needs our help." "Help?" Louisa echoed, confusion etched on her features. "What does he want?" "We need to escape, not help some ghost." Clara stepped forward, her small frame oddly resolute amidst the turmoil. "He's not just a ghost, Mom. He says I'm his daughter. I meant to finish what was started long ago." Marcos exchanged alarmed glances with Louisa, disbelief washing over them. "That's ridiculous, Clara. You can't be serious." "I am," she insisted, her voice firm as it rose above the whispers. "I can feel it. I think I was meant to be here, to help him find peace." The house seemed to tremble in response, the walls vibrating as the shadows danced wildly around the family. "No, Clara, you don't know what you're saying," Louisa pleaded, desperation creeping into her voice. But Clara's expression shifted, becoming almost serene as she reached for the old diary that lay on the ground, its pages fluttering as if alive. "He needs me to read it," she said, her fingers brushing the cover. "He can't move on until I do." "Clara, don't!" Marcos shouted, but it was too late. Clara had already opened the diary, and as she began to read aloud, the whispers morphed into a chorus of anguished cries. "I couldn't save them. Don't let them take you too," Clara read, her eyes wide with understanding, the words echoing throughout the house. Suddenly, the ground shook violently, and dust and debris rained down from the ceiling. "We have to go," Louisa screamed, trying to pull Clara away from the diary, but Clara stood rooted in place, her eyes glazed over. "Dad, I have to find out what happened to them," she cried, determination igniting in her voice. "It's the only way to break the cycle." Marcos, torn between fear for his daughter and the realization that they were running out of time, shouted, "Clara, please, we can't let this house take you too." The walls creaked ominously, and the whispers intensified, wrapping around Clara like a suffocating shroud. "I won't let it take me," she declared, her voice rising above the chaos. "I'm not afraid." Just then, the house shuddered violently, and the floor beneath them began to crack, revealing a dark chasm below. "We're losing the house. "We need to leave now," Marcos yelled, lunging forward to grab Clara's hand. But Clara, with tears streaming down her face, pulled away. "I have to do this. I have to save them." As she continued to read from the diary, a blinding light erupted from its pages, enveloping her in a brilliant glow. Marcos and Luisa shielded their eyes as the house around them trembled, the walls closing in as if they were alive, desperate to hold on to their secrets. "Clara!" Luisa cried, reaching out. But Clara's voice rang out strong and clear, resonating with a power that shook the very essence of the house. "I forgive you, Father. I'm here." In that moment, the whispers transformed into a harmonious melody, and the oppressive darkness that had filled the house lifted slightly, revealing fleeting glimpses of the family that had once lived there. But the ground continued to quake, and Marcos felt the walls closing in. "Clara, please," he begged, terror gripping his heart. But as the house began to collapse around them, Clara stood firm, a beacon of light amidst the chaos, destined to confront a past that refused to let go. In that final moment, the Silvas realized they were forever intertwined with the house's tragic history, a cycle of pain and longing that had now become their own. The night air was cool, carrying with it the faint scent of damp earth and blooming jasmine, as Sofia stepped outside her apartment. The cityscape of Sao Paulo was cloaked in a velvety darkness, the streetlights casting pools of golden light on the pavement. She had felt suffocated by the weight of her recent breakup, the memory still fresh enough to sting. Seeking solace, she made her way to the nearby park, a familiar refuge where she often found comfort in nature's embrace. As she walked along the winding paths, lined with tall trees, their branches swaying gently in the breeze, Sofia attempted to quiet her racing thoughts. The soft rustle of leaves and the occasional chirp of a distant nightingale filled the air, wrapping her in an almost serene atmosphere. But this peace was soon disrupted. In the midst of her solitude, a faint sound pierced through the stillness, the unmistakable cry of a baby. It was a soft, heart-wrenching wail that echoed through the park, sending a shiver down her spine. "Is someone in trouble?" Sofia murmured to herself, her curiosity ignited by concern. She paused, the sounds tugging at her heart. Taking a deep breath, she followed the sound, her heart pounding with each step. The path ahead darkened, the trees growing thicker, their shadows enveloping her like a cloak. "It must be over there," she whispered, pointing toward a dense cluster of bushes to her right. As she ventured deeper into the park's shadows, the cries grew louder, mingling with her rising anxiety. "Hello," she called out tentatively, her voice wavering as it bounced off the trees. The only response was the continued wailing, which seemed to pull her forward. She felt a mixture of dread and determination. After all, she couldn't ignore a child's cries. "What if it's a lost baby?" she thought, the maternal instinct within her urging her on. With each step, the cries seemed to warp and twist, becoming more haunting, echoing like a phantom in the night. Sofia's heart raced as she pushed aside low-hanging branches, her breath coming quicker as the darkness enveloped her. "This is just a prank," she reassured herself, though the nagging doubt in her mind suggested otherwise. Finally, she stumbled upon a small clearing where the trees parted just enough to let the moonlight spill in. In the center, illuminated by the silvery glow, lay something that made her blood run cold. It was a lifelike baby doll, its eyes wide open and eerily realistic, as if it were watching her. The cries were emanating from it, a tiny speaker cleverly hidden within. Sofia took a hesitant step closer, her eyes locking onto the doll's painted features. "Who would do something like this?" she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. A chill ran down her spine as the cries continued, filling the air with an unsettling resonance. "This is sick," she muttered, her instincts screaming at her to turn back. Just then, the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end, and an overwhelming sense of being watched washed over her. She glanced around, the shadows of the trees seeming to shift and swirl. Panic surged within her as she realized that what she had initially thought was a harmless curiosity could very well be a trap. "No, no, no," she said, backing away slowly from the doll, her heart racing. I need to get out of here. She turned on her heel, adrenaline coursing through her veins as she sprinted back toward the path, the haunting cries of the doll echoing in her ears. The park, once a sanctuary, now felt like a maze of shadows, each turn potentially hiding a new horror. With each hurried step, Sophia's mind raced with questions. Who had left the doll? Why was it crying? And most importantly, was she truly alone in the darkness? The night felt heavy around her, and as she plunged back into the path, she couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister lurked just beyond the reach of the moonlight. As Sophia stepped through the dense thicket, the crying grew louder, twisting her stomach into knots. The sound was both haunting and pitiful, echoing through the trees like a ghostly lullaby. She felt an unsettling mixture of concern and dread tugging at her heart, urging her deeper into the darkness. The night air was still, the only movement coming from the rustling leaves above, creating an eerie soundtrack to her journey. What could be out there? She muttered to herself, her voice barely above a whisper. She brushed aside branches and pushed through the underbrush, the sharp twigs scratching at her arms, but she barely felt the pain. All that consumed her was the desperate need to find the source of that agonizing sound. As she stumbled into a small clearing, the moonlight spilled over the ground, illuminating a sight that sent chills racing down her spine. In the center of the clearing lay a baby doll, abandoned and lifelike, its glassy eyes reflecting the pale moonlight. It was propped up against a gnarled tree, its mouth wide open as the cries continued to pour from a hidden speaker, concealed within its fragile body. The doll's expression was disturbingly serene, as if it were unaware of the horror it was invoking. "No, this can't be real," Sophia gasped, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts. She took a step forward, compelled yet terrified. The doll seemed too real, too uncanny, as if it were waiting for her to draw closer. Instinctively, she reached out, her fingers brushing against its soft, worn fabric. Who would leave something like this here? A sudden rustling from behind her made her heart leap into her throat. It was as if the very shadows were alive, creeping closer, encircling her with an invisible threat. She turned, her pulse racing, but the darkness offered no answers. There was no one else around, yet the weight of unseen eyes bore down on her, filling her with a primal fear. "I need to get out of here," she whispered, panic overtaking her reason. She stumbled back, her instincts screaming that this was a trap, a cruel joke played by the night. The baby doll's cries echoed in her ears, a siren song pulling her deeper into danger. Just as she turned to flee, she felt a prickling awareness that someone or something was watching her. The desire to escape surged within her, fueling her legs as she took off into the underbrush, branches clawing at her like desperate hands. Her breath came in frantic gasps, the sound of her heartbeat drowning out the chilling cries of the doll behind her. "What was that?" she gasped, the words tumbling from her lips as she pushed through the thick foliage. "Why am I running?" As she broke free from the thicket and into a more open part of the park, the moonlight flooded her senses. Yet she felt no comfort in its glow. Instead, it only served to illuminate the shadows lurking just beyond her vision. She glanced back, half expecting to see something emerge from the darkness. But there was nothing, only the stillness of the park and the lingering echo of the baby's cries. "Get a grip, Sophia," she murmured, trying to steady her racing heart. "It's just a doll, just a stupid doll." Yet deep down, she knew the truth. Nothing about this was normal. The air felt thick with an unexplainable tension, and every instinct in her screamed that she was not alone. She needed to find safety, to escape this twisted nightmare that had ensnared her. With a surge of adrenaline, she sprinted toward the park exit, her mind racing with possibilities. The doll had been a trap, a sick game set by someone who thrived on fear. But who? And why? The questions loomed heavy in her mind, but there was no time to ponder them. The night was too dark, and the shadows felt too alive. As she reached the edge of the park, a breath of relief washed over her. She dashed onto the bustling street, the warm glow of streetlights illuminating her path. But even in the safety of the city, the sensation of being pursued clung to her like a second skin. She could still hear the echoes of that chilling cry, haunting her thoughts as she stumbled into the throng of people, desperately searching for a sense of normalcy amidst the chaos of her mind. Sophia sprinted through the dimly lit paths of the park, her heart racing wildly in her chest. The echo of the baby doll's cries still rang in her ears, a haunting reminder of the eerie discovery that had sent her fleeing. As she glanced over her shoulder, she swore she saw shadows shifting among the trees, dark figures that seemed to follow her every move. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end, and a primal fear gripped her, urging her to run faster. "Just keep moving," she muttered to herself, her breath coming in quick gasps. The park, once a place of solace, felt like a labyrinth of terror. She burst through the heavy iron gates and into the bustling streets of Sao Paulo, the sounds of the city wrapping around her like a comforting blanket. The distant hum of traffic and the chatter of late-night revelers provided a stark contrast to the haunting cries she had just left behind. Finding a nearby cafe with its warm, inviting lights glowing against the night, she stumbled inside, nearly colliding with a couple seated at a table. She quickly found an empty booth in the corner, the familiar aroma of coffee and pastries momentarily calming her racing heart. She leaned heavily against the table, trying to steady her breath, her mind racing with a whirlwind of thoughts. "Are you okay?" a voice broke through her thoughts. A young man, perhaps in his late 20s, approached her table, concern etched on his face. His brown hair was tousled, and the sleeves of his plaid shirt were rolled up, revealing inked tattoos that snaked down his forearms. I don't know," Sophia replied, her voice trembling. "I think I'm being followed." "Followed?" He slid into the seat across from her, his expression shifting from concern to intrigue. "What happened?" Taking a deep breath, she recounted her experience in the park, her voice shaky as she spoke about the baby doll and the eerie cries. "It felt like a trap," she said, her eyes widening as she relived the moment. "I was so scared. I just wanted to get out of there." The man listened intently, nodding as she spoke. "That's really strange. A baby doll? In the park? It sounds like something out of a horror movie." He leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "Do you think it was some kind of prank?" "I don't know," Sophia sighed, shaking her head. "It felt too real. I could almost feel someone watching me." "Maybe you should call the police," he suggested, but his tone indicated he didn't fully believe in the seriousness of her situation. "No," she said quickly. "I don't want to get involved with them. I just want to forget it." He raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "But what if it's something more? What if someone is actually out there?" Sophia looked down at her trembling hands, the remnants of fear still coursing through her veins. "I just want to go home," she whispered, her voice distant. "Look, my name is Lucas," he said, offering a reassuring smile. "How about I walk you home? It's late, and you shouldn't be alone after what happened." She hesitated, weighing her options. The idea of having someone with her, even a stranger, felt comforting. "Okay," she finally agreed, though a tiny voice in her head warned her against trusting him. As they exited the cafe, a cool breeze swept through the streets, sending shivers down Sophia's spine. The city felt alive, yet oddly menacing. Shadows danced in the corners of her vision as they walked, every rustle of leaves and distant laughter amplifying her apprehension. "Do you live far from here?" Lucas asked, trying to keep the conversation light. "Just a few blocks," Sophia replied, her gaze shifting nervously to the darkened streets ahead. "I usually take this route, but tonight feels different." "Yeah, I get that," he responded, glancing around as if sensing her unease. "Sometimes it's the quiet moments that are the most unsettling." They continued walking in silence, Sophia's thoughts spiraling back to the park. Why was there a baby doll? Who had placed it there? The questions gnawed at her, but she kept them to herself, afraid of sounding paranoid. "Are you sure you're okay?" Lucas asked, his voice breaking through her thoughts again. "You seem really shaken up." "I'm just trying to process everything," she admitted, feeling a mixture of vulnerability and relief at his concern. "I've been going through a lot lately." "I can only imagine," he said softly. "Breakups can be really tough, but you're strong. You'll get through this." Sophia managed a weak smile. "Thanks, that means a lot." As they approached her apartment building, she felt a strange mix of gratitude and dread. She was relieved to be home, but the night had left a lingering chill in the air. "Well, this is me," she said, turning to face him. "Do you want me to wait until you're inside?" Lucas asked, his expression earnest. "No, it's okay," she replied, feeling a bit more at ease. "Thank you for walking me." "Anytime," he said, flashing a warm smile. "Just take care of yourself, all right?" She nodded, watching as he walked away into the night, his figure gradually disappearing into the shadows. As Sophia stepped inside her building, she couldn't shake the feeling that the night was far from over. Little did she know, the real terror was only just beginning. Sophia could barely catch her breath as she and Lucas made their way back into the park, the night air thick with an unsettling tension. The streetlights flickered above them, casting elongated shadows that danced along the path. Lucas, a tall man with sharp features and an intense gaze, walked beside her, his flashlight cutting through the darkness like a beacon of hope in an otherwise menacing landscape. "Are you sure about this?" Sophia asked, her voice shaking slightly as they approached the area where she had found the doll. The memory of the baby's cries still echoed in her mind, haunting her every step. Lucas turned to her, his expression a mix of determination and intrigue. "If what you say is true, we need to find out what's happening here. There might be something deeper at play." He glanced around, the flashlight illuminating the path ahead. "We can't just ignore it." Sophia swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words settle in her stomach. She nodded, albeit reluctantly, and they pressed on. The park felt different now, almost alive in its darkness, the rustling leaves whispering secrets she couldn't quite grasp. As they ventured deeper, the sound of their footsteps echoed eerily, mingling with the distant chirping of crickets. "Look," Lucas said suddenly, pointing to a large tree trunk partially hidden by overgrown vines. "This is where you found the doll, right?" He stepped closer, shining the flashlight into the thick underbrush. "Yes," Sophia replied, her heart racing as she recalled the moment she stumbled upon the lifelike doll. "It was right here. The cries. They were so real." As they searched the area, Sophia's eyes caught something on the ground. It was a piece of fabric, tattered and stained, almost blending in with the soil. Kneeling down, she picked it up, revealing a small patch with a faint image of a child's drawing. A stick figure with a big smile, holding hands with a larger figure. Her heart sank as she turned it over, finding a date scribbled on the back. This is from years ago." "What did you find?" Lucas asked, drawing closer. "It's just a piece of fabric," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it has a drawing on it, a child's drawing, and a date, 2015. She felt a chill run down her spine. What if this is connected to those missing children? Lucas's brow furrowed, his curiosity piqued. "We need to document this. It might be a clue." He pulled out his phone, the screen illuminating his face in the darkness. "We should take a picture and keep looking." Sophia nodded, but her unease only deepened. "What if we're not supposed to be here? What if someone is watching us?" "Don't think like that," Lucas reassured her, but his voice lacked conviction. "We're not alone out here. There are people in the park at this hour, and they might know something." With a renewed sense of urgency, they continued their search, moving further into the park. The flashlight beam flickered over the underbrush, revealing snippets of graffiti on nearby trees. Some depicted children's faces, wide-eyed and frozen in fear. Others bore cryptic messages that sent shivers down Sophia's spine. "Help us," one read. "They are watching," another warned. "Who would do this?" Sophia asked, her voice trembling as she stepped back from the art. "This is disturbing." "Someone who knows the stories," Lucas replied, his expression serious. "We're not the first to be drawn here. There's a history to this place, and it's darker than we thought." Just then, a chill swept through the air, and Sophia felt goosebumps rise on her arms. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, stopping in her tracks. Lucas paused, listening intently. A faint sound broke through the silence, a soft, mechanical wail that sent a jolt of fear through Sophia. It was the sound of a baby crying, echoing through the trees, closer than before. "Is that—" Sophia's breath hitched in her throat. "It can't be," Lucas murmured, eyes widening as he scanned the area. "We need to find out where it's coming from." They exchanged a glance, a shared understanding passing between them, and without another word, They moved toward the sound, their hearts pounding in unison. Each step felt heavier than the last, the air thick with an impending sense of dread. The cries grew louder, more desperate, pulling them deeper into the shadows. As they rounded a corner, a large mural came into view, sprawling across a concrete wall. It depicted missing children, their faces eerily lifelike, each one with a haunting expression that seemed to follow them. Sophia's breath caught in her throat as she took in the chilling sight. "Lucas, this is wrong," she said, her voice barely a whisper as she stepped closer to the mural. "What kind of place is this?" "I don't know, but we need to be careful," Lucas replied, his voice strained. The flashlight flickered again, casting eerie shadows across the mural, and the baby's cries grew louder, reverberating through the darkness, an unsettling reminder of the terror that lurked just beyond their sight. As the shadows deepened around them, the air grew thick with an unsettling silence, punctuated only by the distant echo of the baby's cries. Sophia and Lucas exchanged nervous glances, their hearts racing as they stood frozen in the dim light of the park. The sound seemed to pulse from the very ground beneath them, drawing them back into the darkness that they had momentarily escaped. "Did you hear that?" Sophia whispered, her voice barely a tremor in the stillness. Lucas nodded, his eyes wide, scanning the trees as if expecting something to leap out at them. "We should go check it out," he urged, his voice steady despite the tension crackling in the air. Sophia hesitated, a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach, but the urgency in Lucas's tone compelled her forward. Together they walked cautiously toward the source of the cries, the path illuminated only by their flashlight's feeble beam. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, and the chill in the air seemed to seep into their bones. The cries intensified, a haunting melody that twisted at Sophia's heart, pulling her deeper into the shadows. As they rounded a bend, they stumbled upon a hidden alcove, a small clearing that felt almost surreal in its quietude. A flickering fire danced in the center, casting eerie shadows on the surrounding trees. A group of figures huddled around the flames, their faces obscured by the flickering light. They were murmuring to one another, their voices low and conspiratorial, weaving a tapestry of dark secrets that seemed to seep into the very air around them. Sophia felt an inexplicable chill wash over her as she listened. "What are they talking about?" she murmured, her curiosity battling with the instinct to flee. "I don't know, but we should keep our distance," Lucas replied, his eyes narrowing as he observed the gathering. "It doesn't feel right." The cries of the baby doll echoed once more, this time sharper, as if summoning them closer. Sophia felt a compulsion to move forward, to uncover the truth behind the cries that had led them here. "We have to find out if they know anything," she insisted, stepping cautiously toward the group. As they approached, the figures turned slightly, revealing a glimpse of their faces. Hollowed eyes, twisted smiles that sent a shiver down Sophia's spine. One of them, a woman with wild hair and a tattered dress, caught sight of them and smiled with an unsettling familiarity. "Welcome, welcome," she crooned, her voice dripping with a sweetness that felt anything but inviting. "We've been expecting you." Sophia's heart raced as she instinctively took a step back, but Lucas pressed forward, curiosity igniting his resolve. "What do you mean you've been expecting us?" he challenged, his bravado faltering under the weight of the woman's gaze. "The park has a way of drawing in the lost," another figure chimed in, a man with a weathered face and a voice like gravel. "You're not the first to follow the cries." Sophia's mind raced. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice shaking. "What happened to those who came before us? Those who hear the cries? They become part of the story," the woman said, her smile widening. "It's a cycle, a game of sorts. And you, my dear, are now players." A sense of dread enveloped Sophia as the realization sank in. The baby doll, the whispers, the eerie atmosphere, it was all a trap, a twisted game that she and Lucas had unwittingly stepped into. She exchanged a worried glance with Lucas, who seemed equally unsettled, yet captivated by the mysterious figures before them. "Let's just leave," Sophia urged, her instincts screaming at her to run. "This isn't right." But before they could turn away, the group shifted, their movements fluid and predatory, blocking their path. The warmth of the fire flickered ominously, and the whispers grew louder, a cacophony of sinister laughter and dark promises that echoed through the clearing. "Where do you think you're going?" the man asked, his voice low and menacing. "The night is just beginning, and the game has only just started." Sophia's heart pounded in her chest, a primal fear igniting within her as she felt the icy grip of terror wrap around her. They had walked into a nightmare, and the walls were closing in. The fire crackled, casting long shadows that danced like specters, and the baby's cries echoed once more, a siren's call that threatened to pull them deeper into the abyss. "Lucas, we need to go," Sophia pleaded, urgency lacing her voice as she felt the weight of the darkness closing in. But as the group began to encircle them, the chilling realization hit her. This was more than just a trap, it was a ritual, and they were the unwilling participants in a game that promised only despair. The atmosphere in the park thickened with an oppressive weight as Sophia and Lucas stood frozen, their hearts racing in synchronization with the eerie cries that echoed around them. The moment they had stumbled into the hidden alcove, a sense of dread enveloped them. Now encircled by the flickering shadows of the fire, the group that loomed before them was no longer just a collection of dark figures. They were a looming threat, an embodiment of the horror that had haunted Sophia's night. "Run," Sophia gasped, her voice trembling as she instinctively grasped Lucas's arm. But before they could make a move, the group surged forward, a tide of malevolent energy that swallowed the space around them. Faces hidden in the darkness glinted with excitement, eyes gleaming like predatory animals. "Where do you think you're going?" a voice called out, smooth and mocking. It belonged to a tall figure with a long coat, leaning casually against a tree, the shadows masking his features. "You're not leaving just yet. You've come to play." Sophia's breath hitched in her throat as she felt the world closing in. "We didn't mean any harm. We were just leaving," she pleaded, desperation lacing her tone. "Leaving? You're just getting started." A woman with wild hair stepped forward, her wide grin revealing a set of unsettlingly sharp teeth. "You're part of the game now." Lucas's eyes darted between Sophia and the group, a flicker of panic crossing his face. "Sophia, we need to get out of here. Now!" he shouted. But before they could execute their escape, a strong hand gripped Lucas's shoulder. "Hold on, friend," the man said, his voice low and menacing. "You're not going anywhere without a little entertainment first." With a swift motion, he pulled Lucas away from Sophia, dragging him into the throng of shadowy figures. "Lucas!" Sophia screamed, her heart pounding with terror. She lunged forward, reaching for him, but was met with a barrier of bodies, all laughing, all enjoying the unfolding chaos, as if it were a twisted performance. "Let him go," she shouted, her voice breaking. The laughter intensified, echoing around her like a dark symphony. In that moment, Sophia felt her spirit shatter, the realization dawning upon her like a cold wave. The baby doll, the cries. It had all been a trap, and Lucas was in on it. "No!" she gasped, stepping back in horror. "You set me up! This was your plan!" The words tumbled out, filled with betrayal and disbelief. She looked at Lucas, who was now being pulled away, his expression inscrutable, a mixture of fear and something else, something darker. "Sorry, Sophia," he called back, his voice oddly calm amidst the chaos. "But you were too easy. You believed the story, the doll. It was all bait." "Why? Why would you do this?" Her voice rose, filled with anguish as she tried to push through the encroaching figures, but they were relentless, a wall of shadows blocking her every attempt. "Because it's just a game and you played it so well," he replied, a smirk creeping onto his face. "You were perfect for this, a little lost soul looking for a thrill in the dark." Sophia felt her legs tremble beneath her, the world spinning as despair washed over her. The laughter of the group grew louder, drowning out her thoughts. She was alone now, abandoned in a nightmarish reality crafted by someone she had trusted. Panic surged within her as she turned to flee, weaving through the crowd, but their hands shot out, grabbing her arms, pulling her back. "Where do you think you're going?" a voice taunted, and she felt the cold grip of despair as she realized the truth. There was no escape. As she struggled, the darkness closed in around her, smothering her cries. The park, once a refuge, had transformed into a labyrinth of horror, and she was trapped in its depths. an unwilling participant in a game where the stakes were her very life. The last thing she saw before the shadows consumed her was Lucas's face, twisted with a satisfaction that would haunt her forever.